I have finished listening to the second and third books in the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. I did enjoy them more than the first book, which was a slow slog. The whole of the first book seemed to be setting up the world and characters ready for these next two books. But even though I preferred the second and third instalments, I wouldn't be able to say that I loved or even liked this trilogy. I find parts interesting or thought-provoking, but not enjoyable. Admittedly, I do prefer plot-heavy books, but I do love excellently written characters as well. This trilogy is often said to be character-driven, and it is, but I'd have liked more plot. And the characters, I'm sure they're meant to come across as interesting, realistic, and morally grey, but there's nothing morally grey or ambiguous about murder and torture. These characters are not morally grey at all. Morally black, more like evil men. And I'm saying men because where are all the women in this trilogy? By the amount of women who appear in these books, you'd think that women account for 1% of the population instead of 50%. The two women that appear, Ardi is a supposed love interest who ends up forced into marrying someone, otherwise she and her unborn baby would be killed. Pharaoh, we discover, has demon blood and is used by Bias, the first of the Magi, for his power-hungry evil purposes. Does Joe Abercrombie hate women or something? Even throughout the second book, on the journey to find the seed, Pharaoh is treated as an annoyance by the men, as if they have to suffer her presence with great patience. But they are all far more annoying than her. It was on that journey westwards to the end of the world to find the seed that I wondered why Bias wanted Jezal there in that posse, and first suspected that Bias might be wanting Jezal to become king, which was cemented in my mind later in the book when West did the thing he did. So I'd guessed what was coming in the third book a long way off. On that same journey, I wondered why Kwai seemed to have had a personality transplant. He'd become withdrawn from the group and miserable, which made me wonder why. I thought that maybe he'd found out that Bias was breaking the first law or something, and he'd become disillusioned and sad by that. Either that, or maybe Kwai was wanting the seed for himself, because maybe it could cure his illness. But it turned out that none of these things were true, but there was a reason why he was acting differently. It wasn't him at all. An eater had killed him and had replaced him wearing his skin. In my previous review of the first book, I said that I didn't trust Bias, the first of the Magi, because I didn't know what he was willing to do to get what he wanted. When we were introduced to him, he seemed like he was almost going to be a wise old Gandalf-like figure, but oh no. Bias turns out to be the worst of all of them, the most evil, also the biggest hypocrite. By the end of the third book, he was my most hated character, and I was thinking that he's even worse because he thinks that he's doing good and justifies everything with his twisted thinking. Then Black Dow, of all people, echoed what I'd been thinking of Bias and says the same of Logan. He says, "Do you know what's worse than a villain? A villain who thinks he's a hero. A man like that, there's nothing he won't do, and he'll always find himself an excuse." That's exactly what I'd just been thinking of Bias, so I thought it was rather rude for Joe Abercrombie to copy my thoughts, but apply them to a different character. But then I have very, very little patience or sympathy for men like Logan. Men who have done terrible things, say they want to be better, think they are trying to be good, but carry on doing terrible things. If you want to try to truly change, you have to put in so much work, a whole new way of thinking and feeling, of healing, of starting to truly feel the weight of what you've done, what you've taken away from the people you've committed crimes against and atrocities against. Logan shows no sign of this, and the mirroring of the first scene of the first book, when Logan falls off a cliff into a river, with the last scene of the trilogy of Logan jumping from a height and falling into the river, seems to imply that he's still in exactly the same place where he started, exactly the same person. There hasn't been any change. And we find out from Bethord that Logan is actually far worse than we thought, and was the one who wanted to keep on fighting, and he's the one who kept pushing Bethord on when Bethord wanted to end it. And I still don't know what was going on with Logan in battles when he suddenly became a different person entirely and didn't appear to know what he was doing. I don't know if he was being possessed by a demon who had made it through to this side from the other side, or somehow, or whether it was a psychological break or fugue state, or Logan had a multiple personality thing. But in that state, he thought nothing of killing friend or foe or children. But he makes no attempt to find out more about this state that he knows that he slips into at the most dire point of a battle or fight. He's dangerous and poses a threat to life to everyone around him. I still found Glocta the most interesting character because of the dry wit of his thoughts, but he never wants to get better. He doesn't have any empathy. He's fine with carrying on being a torturer and doesn't even try to change, and uses his having been tortured in the past as an excuse for everything, and just feeling sorry for himself, and as an excuse for everything he's become. All the characters were awful people, and I became sick of them all in the end. The only reason that we were rooting for them was because they were the characters whose point of view we were seeing the story from. But they weren't the good guys. There were no good guys. I know they're meant to be complex characters and realistic, but I don't think so. And I think that Joe Abercrombie and I have very different views of life and morality. So this trilogy will not be making it into my list of favourite fantasy books. Not even close. If you enjoyed this video, please consider going to gofundme.com/SaveJenny, where I'm fundraising for life-saving neurosurgery that's not available to me here in the UK.